I would probably take an average 1-2 grinder playing his A game over an average 25-50 grinder playing his C game any day.
You're listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast. Each week, you'll get to peek inside the greatest minds in the game and discover what makes them successful.
Mental toughness separates those that can't handle the stress.
If you're going to treat it like an amateur, you're probably going to have amateur results.
Here are your hosts, Elliot Rowe and Adrian Talenchik Rousum.
Hello and welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. Apologies for the hiatus for a little while, but there's been a lot going on. Adrian, welcome to the show, and unfortunately we got some big news today and some sad news for the show as well. So Adrian, I'll lead in with that start for you.
Right. Well, I'm sure, as most of my followers will know, 2018 has what's the right word? 2018 has shoot.
Been a crazy one for you so far.
It definitely has gone differently than I had anticipated. In the fall of 2017, I was really excited for poker and everything going forward. And in early 2018, I decided that I would not be continuing with PokerStars as a member of Team Pro Online. And I have terminated my contract with them. And subsequently, with a few other complications, additions, I don't know, I have also gone on hiatus from streaming right now. So one of the additions to our life is that we are going to be welcoming in our third child this fall.
So congratulations there, Jen.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, when changes come, they come in handfuls, right? So I guess that's my trifecta is right now. No, I guess the trifecta is leaving PokerStars, hiatus from streaming, and a bit of a hiatus from the podcast also.
Yeah, so Adrian's kind enough to come on. She's not going to be doing the podcast for a little while she focuses on having a baby and other things. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the work you've put in, Adrian. The shows, it's been a ton of fun since you joined, and we honestly wish you all the best with the new little one and all of the other exciting things you've got planned. Thanks
so much. I mean, it's been a lot of fun, and I'll definitely still listen. And if I hear you getting out of line,
you come back. Well, once again, super fun. I hope all of you guys have really enjoyed Adrian being on the show. I'm sure I'll be pestering her to have her back at some point soon. And I mean, I guess you'll get to listen to the first interview, Adrian, now, because I actually interviewed Ivan. He's our guest this week. He's known on PokerStars as ISL 007. He's played for a number of years, two-time Supernova Elite player, and also a successful coach. And I did the interview on my own, so we're going to jump into that interview now. And Adrian, you can be an excited listener now.
I can't wait.
So welcome to the show, Ivan Stokes, also known as ILS 007 on PokerStars. Ivan's been playing for 11 years now, a professional poker player since he was 18, multiple times Supernova Elite. He's had some big scores in WCOOP events and has also been a coach for a good period of time, having students featured in big live tournaments, final tabling high rollers, and being on poker TV shows. So he's been around the industry, and he's got a lot that he can teach us around mindset and how to be successful in poker. So, Ivan, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, you've been playing since you were 18 years old. What was that like growing up with, poker? I'm assuming really being your main source of income for your entire life.
Well, it's only retrospectively that I can really appreciate that I was a professional poker player at 18, because as far as I was concerned, I was just sort of trying to make a bit of side money for when I'm going to university. So it wasn't really that I came about it as trying to be a professional from the age of 18. It's just that I used to be a chess player I represented my country actually, and quite a few people at that level of chess sort of moved towards poker because there was more of a financial opportunity. And then as I got more into it, I realized that actually this is becoming something a bit more than that. But I still did my university study for many years and did a couple of degrees. And then sort of within 2 or 3 years of making money playing poker, I was more towards, seeing that as my future rather than a job outside of poker.
And that's awesome. And you mentioned the chess, and it is something that's come up before. Successful chess players who've made the conversion. How did you feel that helped you when you started off in poker? What sort of edge did that give you?
Oh, it was massive, because I think in chess, the prominence of computing and its relevance to the game for solving it had really taken off quite a long time before it did in poker. So when I came to poker, there was a real limited amount of software out there that you could benefit from to improve. And just the whole mindset that goes with it, the analytical side of studying the game, whereas a lot of poker pros were sort of more of the old school, using intuition only and sort of just doing what felt right in the situation. There wasn't really that level of professionalism in the game that I had noticed from when I was even as a child learning chess. Even back then, we were taking it quite seriously and having to, really study it in an in-depth way. So I think I got ahead of the curve a little bit that way, because I would come to poker from a very study-minded and professionalized kind of standpoint, even though, I was quite young at the time.
And that's really interesting, because now, obviously probably 2014 onwards, it's just study is such a dominant part of the game. It's expected that you're putting in hours on solvers and things if you want to be a high-level player. When did you notice that shift start to happen, that people were starting to take the game more seriously?
I think that maybe especially after Black Friday, because before Black Friday, the games were presumably a lot softer, and professionals didn't really need to work quite as hard at their game to make a good living. Whereas after that, the games became a lot more competitive. And over time, rate-back programs have become a bit less attractive for players. And it's been a lot more about trying to gain a skill edge through a very in-depth knowledge. And I think along with that, there's just been a lot more information pumped into the market, a lot of really high-quality information, and, solvers have been released and whatnot. So it's not now just the very small minority of pros that have got a lot of money to do customized study behind the scenes. Now this is available to everybody pretty much. And whoever's got the motivation is able to put in the hours and be a really, really good poker player. Whereas I would say about 10 years ago, if you had a hunger for the game and you wanted to get good at it, there was not very much information out there to improve. So it would be more, a matter of luck that you stumbled across some quality information or knew the right person at the right time. Whereas now, just using Google, you'll find the information that you need if you're willing to put in that kind of work.
And I guess there was also the risk back then that, you were going to be learning something that was actually poor information as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So you could put in a lot of effort and get the wrong information coming back. So obviously over that period of times, you did the Supernova Elite runs. And that's something I always like to mention, because as a mindset coach, that used to dominate people's years. I would have a lot of sessions just helping people with the stress of Supernova Elite. And for anyone who doesn't know what it is, it was a rake-back system on PokerStars where you had to play incredibly high volume to be able to get guaranteed a certain amount of money. And how did you deal with the stress of that and the hours that you needed to put in at the table?
I think it's a combination of modeling myself on players I looked up to and seeing the success that they'd been able to have in the same kind of games that I was playing. And then I just tried to understand how they went about it. Sometimes they would make blog posts and, post graphs and information about how they went about it. And then I made my own plans. So once I knew that I had a decent plan in place, and if I can stick to it and win at the tables, it will work, I just believe that. So I wake up each day, I have the plan that I want to sort of stick to as closely as possible. And I try to journal whether I've achieved it or what I'm going to have to make up in future days. And it's kind of weird. I quite like pressure, and I tend to put myself in very high pressure situations, for better or for worse. And having Supernova Elite as a goal sort of helped me as a poker pro with my career, because it gave me this unique purpose to utilize that kind of high pressure environment. Whereas if I could just coast along making easy money on pretty soft games and put in, volume whenever I felt like it, I wouldn't really push myself to the level that I possibly did through the Supernova Elite program and that chase that I did.
That's actually really interesting, because I've had some other pros on who have sort of described it as they were really upset when it was taken away, but it's felt like the shackles have been removed and they've got more freedom in their lives now. Is that something that you felt, or are you really sort of pining for the Supernova Elite days?
Don't get me wrong, if it gets offered again, I'll take it pretty quickly. But I can also relate to what they're saying. I think that as poker players, one very interesting thing that I got told quite a while ago, and at first I was taken aback by it, but I've come to tend to agree with it really, is this notion that pretty much all poker pros at the heart of their sort of personality are sort of gamblers in a way. We like the gamble, we like the adrenaline and everything that comes with it. So the only thing that differentiates ourselves with maybe the more problematic gamblers that lose a lot of money in sort of gambling environments is the fact that we studied the game carefully, that we know sort of how to protect ourselves from what could be a vicious cycle. But fundamentally, it's this mentality which really drives us to want to, play a lot of hours at the tables and achieve as much as we can. So that can be very problematic for obvious reasons. And not only that you could lose a lot of money and sort of spew a lot of bankroll away, the other problem is that your whole life can get taken over by something which you get engrossed by like this. It's got that addictive element to it. So I think a lot of like my friends and colleagues, when the Supernova Elite program went away, there wasn't this obligation to do something so sort of addictive and incessantly. There's another life that you can have. Some of them went to different professions. Some of them just recalibrated how they went about their 9 to 5 and made it a bit more like a 9 to 5 actually. And that would be, for pretty much everyone I spoke to, myself included, just a positive thing all around, really. It was probably something that when you're a younger person with less commitments in your life and, just the first time that you're approaching it, it's okay to do it, but you can't be maintaining that kind of lifestyle for any significant amount of time. It's not healthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something where people would have been, 20 years Supernova Elite if it, if it carried on going.
Be interesting to see a before and after picture if they did have that.
And obviously, we're the mindset advantage, and you've been in poker for such a long time, dealing with obviously a ridiculous volume of games you've played. How do you feel that mindset has played a role in your success over the years?
I think it's been enormous. I've had both the positive aspect of it, sort of believing that I have quite a strong mindset and letting that fuel me forward, but then the more relevant one being, actually, I'm terrible with mindset. I thought I was good, but then, when you have some kind of humbling that happens, whether it's a big downswing or an aha moment or whatever, then you realize actually there's a hell of a lot more that you need to learn. So it's been enormous for me, especially in more recent years as the game becomes more competitive and it's kind of obvious that this is the number one way that you can improve your game beyond everything else. The other stuff's really important, but it's a prerequisite and it's not something that you read for a few hours, you tick the boxes, and then you move on in your perfect Zen-like state. It's something that you have to work on every day, really, with your health, with your well-being, and just with your systems for approaching your playing at the tables.
And what sort of systems are you using? When you talk about working on that every day, what does the day for you look like when you're playing poker?
So if I could sum it up, for me, really, it's about being centered. So there are some specific systems that I'll implement, like maybe a pre-game ritual and an after my session ritual, where I'm trying to build my mind into a way that it can approach the tables focused and also relaxed. And then afterwards to try and wind down and be able to, just sort of get out any stress that I've had from the tables and move on and enjoy the rest of the day. But it's a bit more sort of, it's more profound than that. It's this mentality and mindset where I need to be as centered as possible if I'm going to be able to go into work and perform, in a high pressure environment. And that's more about sort of understanding how you tick as an individual and sort of promoting the things that make you happy, avoiding the stresses that would make you play worse at the tables or just make you more unhappy in general as a person. So, for example, as a poker pro, we often have this opportunity to just sit at the table for 12 hours or sit at our computer desk for 16 hours. And it's tempting to say, if I work for 16 hours and I make this amount of hourly rate, I'm going to make this amount of money. And today I feel like doing that. But if you understand that fundamentally that's going to affect your health, your sleeping pattern, it's not necessarily going to go well that day. In fact, quite likely it could go the opposite and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's more important to understand that your long-term success is going to be a function of a consistent, healthy pattern that you implement on a day-to-day basis rather than one 16-hour grind. 16 hours doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of it. But how you perform for a number of months consistently and successfully is really important. And you've got to stay healthy in order to do that. If you get really sick and then you can't play for a week or two or for longer, that's not going to do you any favors, even if you grinded really hard building up to that.
And is that something that, you mentioned that you have students and things. Is it something where you've seen mindset being a key factor in whether someone manages to be successful or not?
I say it's the number one thing. Most of the students that I have today have been with me for a long time, and if I didn't think they could be very profitable, we wouldn't have been maintaining this relationship for so long. But nevertheless, a number of these students will have certain crises, and I will as a player myself, where there's just certain factors that really trigger this negative mindset, which leads to either lack of productivity because players don't feel like playing for as many hours at the tables, they're sort of scarred from the losses that they've had recently, or whatever else it might be, or they're just playing badly when they do sit down to play. And to be honest, I say one of the number one reasons for that, at least for students, is a lack of bankroll. So not knowing that there's money set aside for a rainy day in case of a downswing. So there's more pressure on the immediate result today, even though we can't sort of force ourselves to win that day. Like, nature will take its course of itself. The variance is not something that we have control over. So to have this mentality that we need to make money today is not really beneficial, because we can't choose whether we're going to make money or not today. And the second thing that I think really impacts on a student's mindset is if they are not a proven winner in the games, or they identify themselves as not necessarily being proven either at a buy-in level or a game that they've moved into. So to put it a different way, if I have a student that's been playing 20,000 of the same sit and go format, and they've been one of the top winners consistently over that period, I don't find that they have these mindset issues that a lot of other players have that might not be proven in that same format. But take that same player, put them in an environment that they're not as familiar in. It's sort of this fear of the unknown and that lack of self-belief that I'm definitely good there. We like to see results in dollar terms, and then we like to see EV numbers in our databases. And without that, we're sort of just putting all of our hopes in this concept that we're probably good, but we don't really know it for sure. And I can identify that a lot myself as well. I've tried to play different game formats, and every time I've moved to a new format, I've had this lack of self-belief initially until I really can see quantifiably that I'm a winner there.
And that's pretty interesting, because what works on both sides of those issues is I often see people really struggle when they move up in stakes, and especially when it's a cash game player and they're moving up to a level that they haven't been playing before. They'll see a table that they believe is soft, but when they sit at the table, their level of play drops from A game to B game because they're uncomfortable when they see the size of the pots, and it just takes them basically off the boil. Is that something that you've seen as well with the way those start to hit things?
Yeah, definitely. And especially if you have this first issue of worrying about bankroll, and then you sit at a table where potentially it will take you twice as long to regain the money on lower stakes as it would take you to lose the money on the higher game. If you do lose at that table, can impact decision making massively. Maybe you're not going to get into a high variance line like a 3, 4, 5 bet pot. Instead, you play a more passive line, which is actually a much less profitable way of playing, but you prefer that because subconsciously you're just not willing to take the risk. And then obviously you're not playing the same game as what you would have played at the lower stake. So I think that's a massive issue. And honestly, it's hard to come up with a hard and fast solution for that. Ideally, we wouldn't be so irrational, or we wouldn't be putting ourselves in those games in the first place. I guess, in short, if for whatever reason, for whatever number of factors, you're having that mindset when you approach the higher game, just don't play it. Make sure that you fix yourself or your own mentality or your bankroll or whatever other thing it might be that needs to be fixed, and then go into the game with 100% confidence. I don't think any player should really sit down at a table where they're not feeling 100% confident.
Yeah, especially with those shot takes. And I think what you mentioned there, one of the key things is if you notice that you're playing a hand differently because of the stakes that you're playing, and you're trying to minimize your variance rather than play what you believe is your game, to me that it's just such a massive red flag for the game itself.
Definitely. And the other problem with that is you might not even consciously know it. It's only retrospectively, or maybe some hand review, or a coach can say, oh, actually, your stats have become more passive. I can show it over the most recent sample. And then there's that, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize it was happening. So that's even more pernicious, because if you don't know it's happening, you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, so keep your awareness high, everyone, as you're taking those shots. And obviously, in the past you had the Supernova Elite goals and things like that. How do you go about your goal setting now that there's not something so rigid in place?
That's a tricky one. I think that I've realigned my goals a fair bit, even just from a sort of poker career standpoint. A lot more of my attention now is towards trying to win in the most competitive and toughest games. And then by doing that, or attempting to do that at least, I'll be a better coach for it, and I'll have more interesting stuff to share with students. So my goal now is, I guess, more abstract. I just try to become better every day. It's really not much more than that. I don't really have money goals. I don't really have volume goals. I have a sort of an idea in my mind, a weekly schedule of how many hours I'm likely to be able to dedicate on certain tasks. But beyond that, I'm just trying to become as good as possible and identify the most relevant stuff that I can work on in order to achieve that. So trying to avoid wasting hours doing something that's just not very fruitful, and instead, even if it's a bit tougher, really try and push myself out of the comfort zone and go into stuff that's really relevant and important for my development.
Man, and I mean, that's just such a wonderful way to be dealing with your goal setting, because those things are actually under your control. I see issues with players as they tell me their daily target for dollars made.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, it's just such an incredibly dangerous thing to do, to say, my target for today, Elliot, is $500. I'm like, poker doesn't work like this. So are you taking it to even the much more abstract of, I just want to play better than yesterday and see where I can get better? It's just so much more powerful as a long-term process, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think I've been forced towards doing that. When you play the same game for over a decade, it's not as obvious where I can say, okay, this game area I'm going to work on and learn it, because you've spent so many years trying to work on those different areas. And then are you going to revisit the same stuff over and over again, or are you going to try and focus in a new direction? So, there are some technical things that I try to focus on, and I try to schedule them separately so that I can have a focused study or playing session. But the overall emphasis is just on how can I become better and what will be the most relevant way of doing it. And often that will involve sort of trying to look at what other coaching stuff is on the market, or some other friends or colleagues who might be able to synergize with for something very interesting, and to do some new projects of that type. Because it's really hard for you to propel yourself forwards as an individual in this kind of game. Like, there's so much more information that can be collected from 1,000 people that have been working on a game problem than what you can do by yourself. So even when I'm trying to improve my own game, I'm asking my students to do this project and that project, and that's actually part of my own study. I'll then review what they build for me. So this idea of collaboration is really important too, and it helps with motivation as well.
Well, I guess it gives you that pressure that you've got to play your part in that collaboration as well, haven't you? So there's a level of accountability there.
Sorry, yeah, I was just going to say I much prefer letting myself down than somebody else. If I have an obligation towards somebody else, I'm not going to really default on that. But I think quite easy to trick ourselves into just taking it easy if we don't have the pressure of trying to do something for the other person.
And as you've seen over the years, as students have been working with you and things, what advice would you have for someone who is trying to get into poker now in 2018? It's different, obviously, from 2007. What would you recommend for them to do to put themselves to give themselves that chance of success?
I guess just really engage with all this great stuff that's out there. There's so much good quality content compared to when I started. So really, there's no excuses for not being able to improve massively. But also a level of honesty. I guess everybody will sell you the next best thing and say, yeah, you're going to make loads of money if you just follow this course. Whereas I would like to say that it is possible to become a really great poker player and to make good money, but it's very difficult. And you have to have that level of honesty from the beginning and say, I really want this, and I know how much work is involved, and I know it's going to take a long time. And if you're willing to accept all of those things and, utilize all the information available, then I'm sure you can do well. But it's that initial statement. You're not going to find any coach who's just going to like give you a pill and then within 10 hours of one-to-one coaching, you're suddenly a great player. It's all on you, really. They can put you in the right direction and can help you where relevant. But over a number of months, it'll be your hard work that will make you a good player.
And I'd like to actually sort of dig into that a little bit. So when you're thinking about that, when you say to someone, this is seriously hard work, can you explain what you feel that level of hard work is for someone to actually have a chance of having a shot? You know, we're not talking about the extreme genius here, but, you know, the normal person, intelligent, wants to take a profession of poker. What should their week look like in your mind?
So if a player wants to become, let's say, a full-time professional, and this will be the job that they rely on for an income, you've got to treat it like that. So this is now your job. You're going to have your sort of 9 to 5 hours or equivalent. You're going to have a working week, which might be around 40 hours. Got to be getting up at the right times, going to bed at the right times. You've got your working hours where you work. You don't sort of just go out and play football or do something else socially. Those are your actual working hours. So that's the first thing. Got to make sure that you've got the background available for like being able to do this thing in the first place. So make sure you've got money stored away, because poker's not a game where you get income every week guaranteed. And then, yeah, I mean, as long as you are willing to put in those types of hours and you're structured, you really can become a professional. I think the reason why there's still good opportunity and why a lot of players can still make good money is because only 1% of the professional players out there do what I'm saying. Most of them are resting on their laurels from the past and just sort of enjoying the easy life. There's very few players that are actually playing and approaching the game as a professional.
And I'll be honest, it's quite refreshing to hear you say those sorts of things, being a player who was playing in 2007. It's something I've mentioned before in the show, that it has come up quite a few times with the people who were playing Black Friday, that, you know, when I say, what are you doing in poker? They'll say, well, I'm definitely a winner, but my last big win was pre-Black Friday. And, you know, there is sort of this, I have seen definitely a difference between some of those pre-Black Friday players and what they want poker to look like. So it's with those guys I'm usually having the discussions of, no, really, you shouldn't be watching TV and smoking weed whilst playing poker and things like that. So how do you think you managed? Do you think it was the chess that stopped you going down that sort of route with the thought process?
It could be a part of that, and I think just me as an individual, I'm not somebody that if I'm doing something, I want to do it as well as possible. So if I was doing all those other things and sort of just chilling, I would know that there's someone else out there who is doing the hard work and they're going to become a better player than me. So in all honesty, it's just this drive to be as good as possible and to be one of the best players. I've got to do whatever it takes to achieve that. And, you know, when you look at professional sports athletes, they're not doing those things. I mean, they're working super hard, so why should it be any different for me?
Well, man, I'm certainly sold on that as a concept. You're playing for millions of dollars. Take it seriously, kids. So, I mean, in terms of, I know you do some coaching stuff. What do you offer? Where can people find out about you?
So I've got a website, which is www.professionalpokervideos.com, where I've got a number of poker courses that I've made for different formats. And more recently, my research has been focused on pre-flop solving. There's new software now, which didn't exist in the years previous, where we're getting new solutions, and it's pretty interesting stuff. So definitely check it out. And aside from that, I've just made a new coaching series for MTTs of the Turbo variety and Turbo sit-and-goes as well. And that's with Your Doom, who was on the show recently, Ryan. So check out his website and you'll be able to see my new series there as well.
Okay, cool. So there's places people can find you there. And, you know, when you see that software coming out, is this something that it makes you excited when you see new software here, or does it give you a feeling of dread that the game is going to change once again?
I think I had that feeling of dread, you know, at least 5 years ago. And then I was resigned to the reality that this is going to be a game which, you know, you're going to have to embrace the technology or you're going to get left behind. So I already got over the dread. And now it's just excitement. I mean, when you spend potentially half a year working on something and you get less than 1% improvement for it, and then something comes along later where you realize, actually, this is the thing that's going to take me to the next level and completely change how I see the game. It's pretty exciting because now potentially I can improve by 5-10% in a matter of weeks rather than before 1% in half a year, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why that would be exciting. Certainly makes sense. And one of the questions always like to ask on the show. So you've been around the game for a decent amount of time. What is the worst sort of level of tilt that you've seen, either in yourself or in a friend at the tables or around poker, where they just really were struggling to cope with their mindset? What stands out to you?
I can remember a few examples. I would recommend that if you don't want to have to deal with all that BS, just don't grind with other friends, because you're going to see it. But with myself, I'd say just sometimes when you realize, either at the time, at a certain moment, or afterwards, I didn't care about anything else. In this moment, I'm feeling so frustrated that nothing matters, actually. Your whole value system changes. Whereas when I'm playing at my A game at the highest level, everything matters. Even small things matter. Not that I'm going to get really upset if things go wrong, but that I respect the value of every pot. Every single decision is super important. If you get into this sort of tilt mindset, or at least for myself, suddenly nothing matters. It's like, okay, I've already messed things up massively, so whatever, this session's going to be crap anyway. And that's just a horrendous mindset to be in. If you get to that point, just walking away, at least in my opinion, is the best thing to do. And working with yourself as well, I understood that there's some mindsets that once you're in them, just need to get away from the tables. You're not going to be able to rectify it by rational thought or anything else. You just need to get away and come back with a fresh mind on another day.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where I think once someone's already on, the work I'm doing a lot of the time is trying to stop people getting triggered and going on tilt in the first place.
Yeah.
Once you realize that you're playing very poorly, at very minimum, stop and take a break. It's something where, okay, maybe you don't want to give it 24 hours, but at least give yourself half an hour, go for a walk, have a shower, those sorts of things, then come back to the tables, because the money that can be lost when you're just playing bad poker and you're chasing losses is pretty shocking sometimes. So yeah, this tip for everyone out there.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And what you said at the end, I think, is vital, just to understand that what you work so hard on for so many hours to build a level of profit can be lost so quickly. I mean, we're talking 20 minutes, you can lose everything that you earned that week. What we win takes a lot longer than what we lose when we play very badly. It's not like it's comparable, like even amount of winnings to even amount of losses. When we lose, we tend to lose very heavily. And when we win, it tends to be more of a consistent grind.
Yeah, so don't waste those hours, please, everyone. Well, man, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Really good stuff. What I'll do, everyone, is I'll put those links that Ivan mentioned on the webpage here for the podcast, so you can click through, check out his stuff, and man, just keep enjoying your trip and have lots of fun at the tables.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me, Elliot, and good luck to everybody else tuning in.
So it was great fun to interview Ivan. It's always good to have someone on who's a true professional and has been in the game as long as that and keeping himself at the cutting edge of poker. So if you guys want to check out my stuff, go to pokermindcoach.com. And I'd also like you to all know that I've actually launched my new podcast as well, which is a general podcast. It's the A Game Advantage podcast. And in the first episode, I interviewed Brendan Burchard, and here's a quick clip of that episode.
They're willing to lay it on the line, and they lay it on the line by reminding themselves of, why is it necessary for me to bring my A game here? Because if you don't do that, what you do, and this is important because I know you got a lot of high performers listening, it's very easy for high performers to just go through the motions because they're good.
So I hope that's got your mouth watering for more of the A Game Advantage podcast. If you're interested, you can subscribe at agameadvantage.com/subscribe, and you'll get the episodes as we release them. We'll be continuing with the Mindset Advantage podcast as well, the poker side, for you guys as well. So don't worry, these poker podcasts will still be coming out, but check out the A Game Advantage for more general life approaches and people people outside of the poker industry. So once again, bye-bye to Adrian. Was wonderful having her on the show. Congratulations on the pregnancy and the big life changes. And we shall talk to all of you soon, or I shall talk to all of you soon. I'm going to have to learn my new end piece. Bye.
You've been listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast. To get future episodes delivered to you automatically, make sure to subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcasting service. To get any resources mentioned in the episode or to listen to past shows, visit pokermindcoach.com/TMA podcast. Thanks for listening.